Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Q&Play, my monthly Q&A series where I answer your questions in a rambly, unscripted format. First question comes from ascrinklyfellow. How do you create bonds with other people's characters when your character lies on the shy side, or even antisocial? Also, how do you create motives for your character to create said relationships? So first and foremost, I don't think you need to create a character that lies on the shy side if you don't think you can play that. It is harder to play an antisocial character. Many will find it easier to play someone more outgoing. I think more roleplay experience is needed if you want to play a character like that and do it well without being, a burden on everyone else's roleplay. I don't want to make it sound all bad though. These kind of characters can be a lot of fun. Masao Takeda from Shadow over Carconos was by far the most laconic of that group, and he was great. I love him. There are plenty of shy, quiet, cool characters who are simply awesome and work great in a party dynamic. The main thing is that last bit that you asked, finding a reason. For example, by the time of God of War 2018, Kratos of Sparta has turned into a very laconic character. He speaks when he needs to speak. But he still does talk. He just talks in a different way from everyone else. His sentences are shorter, more stilted, more purposeful. His longer tangents exist to teach a lesson. That is Kratos' reason for extended speech. Kratos will still initiate conversations and ask questions. They'll just be different questions from, for example, his son Atreus. Atreus will ask about the story of something, the why of a situation. But Kratos, he's looking for practicality. I don't care about the why of Baldur the invincible god. I care about how we're going to beat him. Kratos is still asking questions and initiating conversation. It's just the reason is different. Look for that reason. Look for what your character wants. And then, based on that, figure out how they fit into roleplay and conversations. And when you roleplay, speak in a way that fits your character. Shy characters may be more quiet, while more laconic characters may be more stilted in their delivery. It's not the easiest thing to do, but if you pull it off right, dang, it's pretty cool. Question from AnAppleInaBox. I assume you're going to get the LEGO D&D set. Obviously, I am, duh. You probably don't have it at the time of recording. I don't, unfortunately. But what are your thoughts? Also, are you getting the bonus LEGO Mimic? I'm pretty sure it's just included in the build, so I hope I get the bonus LEGO Mimic. It looks pretty neat. I am really happy with how the LEGO D&D set turned out. I liked the original build on LEGO Ideas. In fact, it was one of the first ever topics we talked about on Tavern Adjacent, our D&D podcast. This was the design that I advocated for and wanted to win. However, the things that I predicted in that podcast would be issues are issues. For example, it is a massive build and therefore, it costs a lot of money. I saw the part count on the original LEGO Ideas build and I felt like, okay, this is going to be $300. It ended up being $360. The build and my main problem with the build is that it kind of teeters a line between playset and display item. I think it is a great display item. The set looks amazing, but a lot of its piece count is devoted to play features that don't necessarily need to be there. I think it's cool they include an owlbear, a displacer piece, and all these extra little details, but those jack up the price. And I think an alternate universe where those things weren't in the build and it was $300 would make me happier. At the same time, though, I do think this is gorgeous. It is a lot better, in my opinion, than the original design, which is not a sentiment I express a lot. No offense at all to the original creator, but I think that dragon is much more Lego than it is Dungeons & Dragons. The new dragon build is perfection. Brick built head, amazing wings, the size is just right. I love it. This might be one of the best Lego dragons ever created, and it's just so classic, both to D&D and to Lego. The minifigs took some warming up to. I felt like they were okay at first glance, but I do think, upon looking at them again, that they represent a pretty good idea of your general D&D party. They fit that mold. You got all the archetypes represented there, and I like that. Overall, I am really hyped to get my hands on this build. It's on back order right now as of recording this, so it's going to take me a while. I also don't currently have the room to display it. Ever since I got Rivendell, that took up a ton of my LEGO shelf space, but I am moving out soon, so, who knows what kind of elaborate shelving system I'll get my hands on for my LEGO collection at that point. Question from Machamp. What's your favorite third-party subclass? Mine is Circle of the Owl Druid from the Midgard campaign setting. Something about turning into a swarm of owls hits different. So my favorite homebrew anything in terms of class stuff for Dungeons & Dragons has got to be the talent from MCDM. I think that this PDF just has so much content. If you guys are unaware, I'm a huge fan of Matt Colville and MCDM, and the talent is just a really cool addition to Dungeons & Dragons that I think fills in a little bit of a gap. Psychic abilities are represented in D&D, and I do think the talent takes it to a completely different direction, which does kind of clash with the existing game design. However, the breadth of features added is just unbelievable. The talent has a ton of different specs, its own custom psychic powers, and while yes, this isn't a subclass like you were asking, it does have plenty of subclasses, and the PDF even comes with psychic dragons, which is awesome. I've been really into the telepath fantasy recently. Imogen Timmels from Critical Role was like the first nudge in that direction, and an NPC I'm creating for an actual play coming up very, very, very soon at this point was my final deep dive into creating a ton of psychic characters and telepaths in my D&D game, because that fantasy is cool, and again, it's not truly represented. Stuff like Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, for example, like yeah, there's psychic elements there, but they're still shooting out fireballs and doing normal mage things. The talent is a pure mind bender. None of that other spell crap. They have their own power list, their own set of abilities that differentiate them from everything else in the game, and I really like that. Now, as I said to Bob World Builder when talking about MCDM, one flaw is that they don't really fit into the D&D existing ecosystem. It's like a criticism I have of a lot of Minecraft mods, for example. I know that's a random example, but I think it does fit. A lot of Minecraft mods do their own thing. They're not vanilla friendly. They just have their own systems they add into the existing game. They fit, but it's fit adjacent. And the same thing goes for a lot of MCDM stuff, aside from Flea Mortals, which is perfect in every way. In terms of specs for existing classes, there is a Wild Magic Sorcerer replacement that I really like that allows you to pick and choose categories for your Wild Magic to set off. So you can purposely set off on a defensive Wild Magic Surge, for example, and obviously it can backfire on you, but most of the options will pertain to defense. I like that. Adds a little bit of strategy, though I can't find the PDF for the life of me. Okay, next question comes from Anarchy1765. How would you write a bounty hunter in a medieval fantasy setting? I'm trying, but whenever I think of bounty hunters, my mind immediately jumps to either cowboys or Star Wars. Do you want me to be honest? I don't shy away from that fantasy. I like diverse settings. I like settings with a variety of aesthetics. Obviously, I'm not going to straight up put Wild West cowboys into D&D. I'm going to flavor them and change them in a way that fits the technology level in the setting. But I do lean into that fantasy a lot because I enjoy Western stories, and melding them into the world of Dungeons and Dragons, that's fun. It's a lot of fun. I've sometimes gotten criticism from people who really I can't be bothered to listen to, who are like, well, if you like Wild West stuff, stop playing D&D. But that transformation, that melding, is part of the fun of it. Destiny, for example, has such a wide variety of different aesthetics represented, from medieval knights to gunslinging cowboys, and that's part of what makes that universe so much fun. It works so well because the developers and the writers put the effort in to make it work, and it makes the universe so much more fun. I'm okay with settings that stick to one aesthetic. Like Red Dead Redemption 2 is a Western. You're not going to be seeing medieval knights in RDR2. But at the same time, I also like diverse settings like Destiny. Now, if you really want to stick to that medieval setting, then lean into something like Castlevania or even Bloodborne. Bloodborne, I think, has a really good aesthetic for what a bounty hunter could look like. Or lean into the outlaw kind of thing. Not outlaw like a cowboy, but outlaw like Robin Hood. That's another aesthetic that I would go for when trying to create some kind of bounty hunter in a medieval setting. Or alternatively, you could create a gang of eldritch cannon-wielding, demon-summoning cowboys like I did. You know, both are options. Question from Jasper the Artist 7719. What's your opinion on playable monster races in D&D? I think it depends on what kind of monster you're talking about. If you're talking about goblin or orc, absolutely, no question, heck yeah. I love goblins, I love orcs, and I think they perfectly fit as playable characters. If you're talking about a Lithid, it depends on where in my setting you are, but I think it could work. If you're talking about playing a straight up red dragon, okay, you're stretching credulity a little bit there. I can't really tell you what the cutoff is for me. First and foremost, it just depends on what exists in my world. Like, for example, the hobgoblins of the D&D universe don't really exist as they are in my world. Like, you're just not going to find that kind of creature inside of my lore, and therefore you can't play as them. There are equivalent creatures that fill their niche, you can play as those, but hobgoblins from D&D and the Forgotten Realms do not exist in my homebrew, so therefore you can't play as them, obviously. Again, these kind of decisions, they just come to personal preference. I'm sure there's a DM out there who would love to have a Red Dragon player character and would be okay with making that work, but for me, there's only so much I'm okay with making work. Like, I'm already making 1,000 things work as a dungeon master. You don't need to give me an entire other thing to work on. When it comes to something like a goblin or a kobold or an orc, heck yes, play as those to your heart's content. I think that can work perfectly. But again, there is a cutoff, and I do reserve the right to say no to wanting to play as a friggin' beholder. Question from Weirdly Curly Plant Stem 8329. Not for me, but for a friend. He's running a campaign, has to kick someone out because they hardly show up. However, there's unrelated real-life drama going on, and he's worried that the player will see that as the reason. Any tip on how he can make it clear that the absenteeism is the real issue, or just tips on kicking a player in general? First and foremost, you need to present the reason, and you have the reason. The reason is absenteeism, and therefore, just tell them that. Tell them, hey, look, if you can't attend the game, we can't run the game for you. It's become a real issue, and I'm gonna ask you to step away. If you are genuinely interested in them sticking around, if they can get that problem under control, then tell them that as well. That will be a nice little bit of encouragement for them to improve their behavior. But if you aren't interested in this person returning, tell them that. Tell them, look, this has become a real issue. It's really stressing out our group, and I think it's best if you find somewhere else to play. It's been great, but it hasn't worked out. I'm going to be frank with you and say this. There is no easy way to kick someone out of a group. There's no easy way to kick someone out of freaking anything. There's always going to be a problem, especially depending on the person that you're kicking out. If they're the type of person who will cut you off and say, oh, wait, no, it's not this. It's this other reason you're kicking me out. That's bad. That's a problem. And that is a sign that you definitely don't want this person in your group and that you're making the right decision. Just present them with the real reason. If they confront you with the other reason, tell them that's not the problem. If they continue to be upset about the other reason, well, congratulations, my dear friend. You have just been validated. Like I said, it's never going to be easy to kick someone out of a D&D game. You should not go into this process thinking that it's going to be all hunky-dory at the end of it, because it is an awkward conversation. It is going to cause rifts. It's possible that this person might stop being your friend altogether. I don't want those things to happen, and I'm not saying those things are likely, but it is a possibility. And I don't want to present a false narrative that, oh, kicking someone out of your D&D game and severing that connection, that's nice and simple and all gonna be fine in the end. Like, no, if it's done wrong, I mean, heck, if it's done right, stuff can go wrong. Because you're dealing with people problems. And with people problems, there's always going to be an unpredictable element. I mean, it's part of what makes D&D so much fun, but it also is what presents problems when issues arise at the table. I think removing someone from the group because of them being constantly late or constantly just not showing up is perfectly valid. And this person should understand that. And if they don't, well, that's their problem, not yours. But you need to approach this with an air of kindness and neutrality. You shouldn't be throwing this person out the front door. Approach it with some genuine kindness, and hopefully it'll all turn out well in the end. And if they respond to your kindness with hostility, again, validated. Final question, and oh my god, I'm not looking forward to answering this one. It comes from James over here. Do you think a certain class in D&D should be removed or changed entirely? One of the designers talked about whether or not to cut down core classes for the upcoming edition. I am so conflicted on this. So, honestly, I really don't see any reason to remove the core classes. Like, I heard the arguments, and I understand them. It's just, I don't see it as a priority. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's kind of my motto when it comes to these sort of things. When I'm doing character creation with new players, I have never before in my life heard, oh, there are too many classes. I wish there were less. Like, there's a decent amount of classes, but it's not like there's 20 of them. There's enough that I think a new player can wrap their head around the concepts of the classes. And I do think 1D&D already provided an interesting solution for new players getting into the game with grouping the classes into certain categories. Those categories having intrinsic abilities that link the classes together in a loose way, but also make it easy for a new player to sort of understand the fantasy. Like, for example, Fighter, Barbarian, and Monk being grouped together under the Warrior category and getting passive bonuses shared between them. I think that that is a great solution. Class categories. I like that. I've looked at games like Candala Obscura or Call of Cthulhu, where the class design is much more minimal than D&D, but those are different games with different purposes and different fantasies. They are separate from D&D in mechanics, and even in dice in Candala Obscura's case. I think it is silly when someone looks at a completely different game with completely different mechanics and goes, oh, that game only has 3 classes, and they're doing great. I mean, I could point to a video game like Destiny that only has 3 core classes, but again, Destiny fulfills a completely different fantasy. And when you look at a game like World of Warcraft, another fantasy RPG online, they have just as many classes as D&D has. Matt Colville's tabletop role-playing game, probably a far better example, also has 10 plus classes because the designers felt that's the number required to fulfill the fantasies needed for the game. I think D&D has a fine amount of classes. Would I like to see some reworks? I mean, maybe. Like, I think Ranger has had some amazing specs, but I think Ranger features need changing. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. My biggest problem with D&D is the freaking monster manual, and for the love of God, I've seen barely any talk about that, and it's frustrating as all hell because I think that's the biggest issue with D&D's combat and D&D's mechanics is boring enemies and bad game design when it comes to that end of the DM screen. Cutting down classes, making simpler classes, I think that's an interesting idea, but I don't think that should be the top priority. When it comes to making combat more fun, a core part of the mechanics of D&D, a core part of the game that so many people want to skip over, I think the monsters are the first step. I want to see that before I see friggin' anything else, man. That's a wrap. Hey, if you enjoyed this 1D&D discussion, you can check out our 1D&D discussion with Bob Worldbuilder. I think I mentioned him earlier in this video. It was a fun one, linked in the cards. If you enjoyed this video though, then please do leave a like. If you want to get notified of our content right as it comes out, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so that you don't miss a single upload from Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own questions or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment absolute to reference the game we're playing in the background and to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.